January 22nd is the first time I asked for the information. It's now more than 4 months. The problem is that I see going forward is a lot of the numbers that are being promised for City for Champions are not having any conservative values. They're having the best case scenarios and what we're going to see and what each department's going to see as a net benefit to doing these projects. There's no downsides being discussed. It's all positive. We had the firefighters being asked to back the plan, the Parks Department saying this is going to be your share of the growth that we're going to have. I don't know what other departments and whether agencies are given the same. And my concern is that we're not having a balance here. I want to just give a reminder about what the state's sales tax increment financing is for City for Champions. It's hard to see, but this is the latest. This is the application and funding sources for each of the projects. What's not there in the columns is which project is which. And the last column is the total. So you'll see the state increment is $47,500,000. And the second column there, or the third, is the downtown stadium. That's the state portion, best case, that will be presented. So if you look at overall funding, that $47.5 million is 18.95% of the project. The downtown stadium, the state, in the best case scenario, would be 16.4%. For the stadium, the rest of it would be us. There's no other sources. We keep hearing $120.5 million is what the state's giving, but the state, that $120.5 million would make payments to get us to borrow $47.5 million. So really the state's contribution will pay for $47.5 million of the project. So working backwards to figure out what is the ratio for the cost of financing, because that's what you did there, $120.5 million is the P&I payments over 30 years. It's a ratio of 2.58. So for every dollar you can spend on the project, when you add in the cost of financing, you multiply by 2.58. If you do a reverse amortization over 30 years for that amount, you end up with about 7.58%, which is about right for this type of financing. So that's where the numbers come from. Using that same issue there, you find these other numbers make sense. The application had the RTA zone TIF for the city and the county on there. That was in November. It was discussed at the EDC hearing. It was discussed here in council. In communications with the city attorney's office, they weren't aware at the time that we were doing a local TIF. They thought it was just the state TIF, and that any local TIFs would have to be in an urban renewal area. That's from the city attorney's office. The RTA zone, though, is 90% of the city. 90% of the cash registers in the city will be giving a portion of the increase in sales tax. This is what's proposed. Of course, we would have to approve it. And it got me to look at, if you look at the response on the conference call December 11th. Of course, the hearing was December 4th. December 11th, there's a conference call. The state had asked some questions about what is the, this came from Appendix D of that. It is a master financing schedule. And on the master financing schedule, there is a City of Colorado Springs RTA TIF. It's hard to read, I apologize. City Council approval of the ordinance authorizing regional tourism zone urban renewal area and establishing the city TIF. So it's in there, and it's actually, whoever put forward this actually envisioned us having an urban renewal area, which is in line with what the city attorney's office said. So now this urban renewal area, which covers 90% of the city, is part of the City for Champions financing plan right now. And if you look at the second line there, City Council approves the ordinance transferring of TIF revenues to the Urban Renewal Authority. This is presented to the state from the people doing the application. So this is what they have in the plan. And that was planned for July of 14, if you look at the PERT chart. So since I didn't get the answers, I'm working backwards. I'm doing some reverse engineering here. If you look at the financing, $32.5 million would come from the City of Colorado Springs RTA zone TIF. And if you use that multiplier I told you earlier, it comes out to $84.1 million. What's interesting is that is the same exact number that comes from table 5.8, which is what they say we're going to be able to get in that city TIF from net new out-of-state visitors. So $84 million so that we can bond $32.5 million. Okay, so there's reverse engineering. Well, to get to the $84 million, the application had how much per year, and that represents 13.08%. It's kind of busy. What we do know is we know what the actual 2013 city sales tax revenues were. We know that the application that got approved from the EDC was 13.08% was attributed to net new out-of-state revenues, even though the third-party analysis recommended 6.13, less than half of that. I created a spreadsheet to go backwards to say, in order to achieve the revenue that they're saying we're going to get from this 13.08% of the city TIF, I worked backwards to figure out what is the percent of growth in the general fund using 13.08%. And if you look at, and this is over the 2013, 16.4% growth to achieve what they're saying we could achieve. In 2043, that would be increased up to 24.5% growth over the baseline. So what I'm saying is these numbers, unless somebody can show me where we've had growth, or anybody that's undertaken a project like this has had growth of 16.4% in 1 year, I think it's really unrealistic. And I'm just trying to find out what is the premise for those. The other thing I did in the same spreadsheet is say, well, what if we only grew by the rate of inflation? Okay, well, if the inflation was, let's assume 1%, and if anyone wants a copy of the spreadsheet, I've got something you can insert all these things, rate of inflation, and you're welcome to it. If we have 1% inflation, the expenses to the general fund increase by 1%. Well, we don't get to collect 1% of growth in revenue because we're going to take 13% of that growth off the top. So now our general fund is not keeping up with the cost of the increase due to inflation. So every year, if it grows by 1%, we're actually taking a hit because we can't pay the increased expenses from inflation because we're giving a piece of the inflated revenues to the projects. In 2015, that underpayment would be $300,000. In 2043, that would be $5.2 million less than inflation. So I'm having to do this as a reverse engineering project because we don't have actual numbers. But when you do it, it really should raise a lot of questions, and I hope it does. The last thing, this is the last slide, is former chief of staff at the last C4C meeting. I read it. I read a quote saying it would be foolish to oppose the plans at this preliminary juncture. And I'm really questioning how preliminary it is. We're hiring architects, museum directors. They're being chosen. The city advertised a City for Champions staff member to assist in economic vitality. I put up there some of the positions, the position salary and what they would do. Economic Vitality seeks an administrative technician to perform a variety of administrative, secretarial, and accounting duties to support City for Champions project manager. So how many other things are going on that we don't know about that we've approved in the budget that are now going to pay for this project and we haven't had any say on it? I am asking the question, what about CVB funding? Are they spending money on marketing? There were 2 full-page color ads in the Gazette in the last couple weeks about City for Champions. Who's paying for those? The CVB gives money by contract to the sports corp. Well, is that sports corp money from the CVB? There's no way for us to ever know because it's left the city. We don't have any control over it. But these are questions that are very concerning, and I just wanted to raise them in public.
Any questions? Thank you for the information.
If I could just make a comment on just one item.
Go ahead,
so
Brad.
the administrative technician brought up there, that's going to support overall economic vitality. So I just want to make sure that's clear on that position. Thanks.
Okay. All right. That is, did anybody else have any public comments? And I didn't get that done. Any added agenda items? There isn't any. No executive session. Have a good evening, and we're under 3 hours.